Hello, folks. What a 24 hours it has been in Formula One land. Sebastian Vettel will no longer be a Ferrari driver after 2020. Carlos Sainz will take his place. Daniel Ricciardo moves into the vacant McLaren seat. And where does that leave Renault? Where does it leave Vettel? All these questions we may get somewhere closer to answering over the next few minutes. I'm delighted to welcome, along with me, Will Buxton, Lawrence Barretto, senior writer at F1.com. Lawrence, you've been tapping away like a wild thing these last 24 hours.
Oh, it's been brilliant. I mean, in the lockdown, when it's got so quiet and we haven't really had any proper news, to get two massive stories that follow one huge story this week has been absolutely sensational. And it's that kind of thing where you spend a lot of time on the phone, you're ringing lots of people, you're just trying to get an idea of what's going on so that you're kind of ready to react when the news drops.
Now, for those who aren't aware of exactly what's happened, fill us in very quickly on the timeline of how this all played out.
So it all kicked off earlier this week when Sebastian Vettel and Ferrari said that they're no more after the end of this year. And I would say that the timing of it was a surprise, but we kind of saw it coming. And then a couple of days later, Ferrari announced that Carlos Sainz would be joining alongside Charles Leclerc in one of their youngest ever lineups. And Daniel Ricciardo will be leaving Renault and heading to McLaren. Was
that a surprise to you? I'm going to say it wasn't to me because I predicted this at the start of the year.
I mean, you predicted this pretty well, to be fair, didn't you?
Got one thing right in 20 years. It was about time. But the romantics out there wanted Daniel Ricciardo to go to Ferrari. There were all the rumours of Lewis Hamilton to Ferrari. Let's ask, first of all, why has Sebastian left? Why do you think Sebastian has left Ferrari?
I think he saw that the writing was on the wall last year when Charles Leclerc, just before Christmas, and Ferrari announced that he was going to be at Ferrari for the long term. So he signed a long-term contract to the end of 2024. And that kind of showed everyone, including Sebastian, that he was the future. And Sebastian had been the team leader up until that point. So it must have been really tough for him to accept. Obviously, he had to consider whether he wanted to stick around at Ferrari for a little bit longer because it's still a competitive seat. But he obviously couldn't reconcile with the team a way forward that he was comfortable with. And you would imagine those conversations went along the lines of, if it comes to it, you need to support Charles rather than we're supporting you.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. I think you're right that 5-year continuation for Charles, which not even Michael was given a 5-year continuation at Ferrari, really pointed him out as their focus for the future. But if Seb wasn't willing to sign up to play wingman to Charles, essentially, is that what Carlos will have to do?
See, I personally don't think so, based on the conversations that I've had. I think that obviously every Ferrari contract probably has something in it that says you need to drive for the team, not for yourself. So I think there'll be an element of that. But I think there's no reason why Carlos can't go in there. And if he shows that he's good enough, just like Charles did last year, why can't he emerge at the end of the year as the number one driver? And maybe he'll become their future going forward. You just don't know until we get racing, I think. But I think they're going to give him a shot. And I think that the key thing is they know they'll get on. So I think they just want some harmony in that team. And let's see. I think it's going to be tough for Carlos to beat Charles in that first year, but you never know.
I think what Carlos showed last year at McLaren, which was such an amazing year for him, was that that ability to be a team player, to work well, to play well with his teammate. Can you see there being fireworks between Carlos and Charles? Or do you think it will be quite a harmonious relationship between the two?
Well, I did wonder what would happen between Carlos and Lando as they continue, because last year was that first year where they could kind of settle in together, and it was unclear whether they would be able to keep that fun relationship going into this year.
The bromance was never going to last.
Well, this is the thing. I don't think it was. Clearly, you agree, Will.
Yeah, no. The bromance was never going to last because they'd want to one-up each other, all the time at McLaren, and as McLaren was going places. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it pans out at Ferrari. I joked earlier about making the prediction. Someone on Twitter had made the prediction, I think 2 years ago. They said that Carlos was just following the same career moves as Fernando, having started at Toro Rosso, Minardi, obviously, to Renault, to McLaren, to Ferrari. Why do you think that Ferrari plumped for him? Why do you think they chose Carlos? What did he show last year at McLaren, and what's he shown, throughout his career that you think makes him that perfect Ferrari driver?
I think there's actually quite a few things. The first is that he's gone through a lot of knocks already. Red Bull passed him over, Renault passed him over. He went to McLaren, and while they wanted to make him the team leader, the jury was still out on that score. And he's delivered. He delivered from the very beginning at McLaren. He spent so much time there at the factory over the winter, then had a mega year after 3 difficult opening races where he didn't score points. His ability to absorb the pressure and not get down is incredible, really. And I think he gets a lot of that from his dad. Obviously 2-time rally world champion. Yeah. And I think that really played a part in Ferrari's decision. The other thing is, I think, like we've touched on, he's going to get on really well with Charles. He's just not going to be disruptive. Maybe in year 2, when he's proved this year, in 2021, that he's pretty handy. But I think in the first year, he's exactly what they need. They didn't need 2 top line drivers, Ferrari. They never do. They just want one solid driver that they can back, and another driver to back him up, kind of like the way Valtteri Bottas and Lewis Hamilton work.
Interesting. So it sounds like you're suggesting Carlos will be a bit of a wingman for him.
I think that if worst case scenario and he can't match Charles, then I think that he can fulfill the role that they really want, which is to win the Constructors' Championship. But I do think that they believe that by bringing him on, he can also step it up, win races. And if it emerges that he's the one with the best chance for a title at the end of the year, that he's got what it takes to take that pressure. And I genuinely think he can do that.
It's a very young lineup as well. Of course, he left a vacant seat at McLaren. The team absolutely adore him. But what it's enabled Zak Brown to do is sign a driver that he tried to sign a couple of years ago before Daniel ultimately chose to go to Renault. And this, I think, is possibly one of the more astonishing stories. Carlos to Ferrari has always made a lot of sense to me. Daniel's move to Renault took everybody by surprise. And he said last year, I think, trying to keep a brave face on what turned out to be a very disappointing season, he was in it for the long term. There was a plan. He was there. He wanted to help rebuild the team and push it forward. And yet, after just a season of competition, he's out. He's gone. He doesn't want to be there anymore. And he's moved to McLaren at, frankly, a brilliant time for McLaren, bringing the Mercedes engines on board for 21. Are you surprised that Daniel's gone to McLaren, or do you think he was looking for a way out of Renault anyway?
I think it's interesting, Will, that you mentioned the Mercedes engines. I think that was a huge part in his decision. That power unit's bulletproof, isn't it? And you can count on several hands how many problems Ricciardo's had with the Renault engine over the years. So I imagine that he was getting to his end of the tether on that score. I think during pre-season testing, I had some time with him for a feature interview, and he was in quite a good mood in that Renault actually looked pretty decent. And I think then at that point, when I asked him about his future, he sort of said, well, I don't think I'm going to create the excitement this year. The irony, of course, is that he has done it again for the second time in succession. But I feel that when it came down to it, he wasn't prepared to wait for Renault to prove to him again that they could deliver a car capable of what he needed. And the fact that we're not racing now really hurt, because Renault didn't have an opportunity to say, hey, look, we've actually got a good car. And Daniel didn't want to wait until the end of the year and then potentially lose that seat at McLaren to say Sebastian Vettel. Like, who's to say that McLaren wouldn't have gone after Sebastian if they didn't think that Daniel was available?
Hell of a lineup as well. Lando and Daniel. It's going to be fun at media times, isn't it?
Oh, it's great. Like, Lando showed last year what a great breath of fresh air he is for Formula One, and Daniel's been that breath of fresh air since he's entered it. I think that together, at least initially, they're going to get on really well. I think it will be interesting to see how that changes when maybe Lando struggles to keep up with Daniel, because I think he's going to go in to that team and he's going to get his feet under the table pretty quickly. And I think there potentially might be a slightly bigger gap between Lando and Daniel than there was at Carlos. So I'm really interested to see, I don't know what you think, Will, about how Lando is going to react to that.
I think it's going to be fascinating. I think despite the happy, smiley sort of persona that they display out of the car, in the car, they are so deadly serious, both of them, and proper hard competitors. So it's going to be fascinating. I think you're right to see how the relationship meshes. Lando's been at McLaren for such a long time. He's an absolute darling of the team. Zach totally loves him. But, as we've seen at Renault with Daniel, he just gets in there, as you say, gets his feet under the table very, very quickly and just gets on with the job at hand. He is kind of following in Carlos's shadow, isn't he, from Red Bull to Renault to McLaren. Maybe Daniel will get the Ferrari call up in a couple of years' time. But
Just maybe.
Yeah, you never know. The fascinating thing, though, from all of this now is that the big loser in this whole carousel is Renault. What happens now? We're hearing, lots of tweets going out yesterday. Renault posting some wallpapers with Fernando Alonso. Fernando sort of, replying with the tweet with little winky faces. Do we think Fernando might come back? Like, what on earth do Renault do? Because you can't overlook. This is a massive embarrassment. Daniel was the big get for them, big money investment for them, and all the headlines. Daniel's going to take us back to winning ways. It's us and Daniel for the future. And Daniel's gone. You know what? Actually, I don't see it. I'm off. It's not a great time to be leading that team.
No, and it's going to really have hurt Renault that Daniel's decided to leave, because it just shows that he doesn't have belief in the project, and you've got to worry about what that will do for morale at Enstone. They've been building and building and building for years, keep consistently talking about being in this transitional phase where they're trying to kind of get on par with the Red Bulls and the Ferraris and the Mercedes, and they've just not managed it yet. And really, if anything, they took a back step last year, and McLaren are ahead of them. And I don't really know what's going to go on with that team. From next year, they're only going to supply themselves with engines, so they're down to just one team to supply. I wonder if that's going to make a difference. I wonder whether they're even going to stick around in the sport beyond this. You've got to say that at the moment, as they've lost their star driver, that's got to be something that the Renault board are going to be thinking about. That said, if they are able to, say, bring a Sebastian Vettel or a Fernando Alonso, or even just bring Nico Hülkenberg back, because Renault really got on very well with him when he was in the team, then maybe they can save the situation. It's funny how things can change very quickly. But I think it's clearly something is going to have to change, because something isn't working. They've recruited Pat Fry's joined the team, and it seems like they're making the right moves, but the results aren't coming, which means that the overall strategy is wrong. And I'm not sure who or what they need to do to change to turn things around. And I guess that's part of the problem. They've maybe tried lots of things and none of it's worked.
Yeah. Right. Vettel, where does he go? Does he retire? Does he end up at, I don't know, alongside Kimi at Alfa Romeo? Where if you're a 4-time world champion and you're at this part of your career, what do you do? Where do you go? Do you think he's had enough? Just wants to walk away?
So I think a lot of it is actually about his mindset. And I think you can probably drop in here, Will, a story about last year in Russia when he had that, he kind of disobeyed team orders, was probably going to win, and then had issues. And then you started thinking about a few things that maybe dictated what happened after.
Well, I can't help but go back to Monza when Charles won for Ferrari and Seb had that horrible race, and him kind of looking up at that podium and the sort of the Tifosi anointing their new hero in Charles. And you could see something in Seb, I think, changed after Monza. The win in Singapore, controversial as it was with the strategy, and then that Seb of old coming back in Russia, sort of doing those multi-21 shenanigans again of, I'm out for me, actually. And it backfired, and I think it took the wind out of him. And you could see, in Abu Dhabi, he came in and he looked so done. Whether it was with Formula One or with Ferrari, there was just something in his demeanour that said, you know what, I'm over it. And the same with the launch. He was there, but I don't know if he was still feeling it. Is it that he wasn't feeling Ferrari, or is it that he's not feeling Formula One anymore? And I don't know what the answer is. I hope we don't lose him, but the question is, where does he go to maintain that competitive edge that he needs to keep him excited and to keep him wanting to be in Formula One?
So I think the very reason that it took so long for Ferrari and for Sebastian to say what they were going to do is because Seb didn't actually know, and he was leaning more towards the fact that he wants to find a way to make Formula One work. He's not done yet. This is not how his story was supposed to end. Ferrari, the chapter, he was supposed to bring the title back to them, even if it's not going to be with Ferrari. His last world championship came 7 years ago. He doesn't want to leave Formula One as a guy who kind of won a few championships right at the beginning and then struggled for the rest of his career. I think he's really hungry. The problem is that there isn't a seat available at the moment, seemingly realistically, that he can take to challenge for race wins and championships. And I think you're right that that's all he's really interested in. And I'm just not sure whether he wants to hang about, say, racing a Renault and racing for what, 8th, 9th, 10th, maybe a bigger result, maybe a 4th or 5th.
What about the world champions? Because there's a vacant. I mean, Lewis is probably going to re-sign until 2030, but there's going to be a seat alongside Lewis at Mercedes. If you're Toto Wolff, would you sign Seb just for a year?
Oh, I'd love it. Oh, it would be great, wouldn't it? It would be so good. I think that Sebastian, when he's in that mindset of going into a new team, knowing he's probably going to have Lewis worried, at least initially, because he's going into Lewis's house. And if he can really get on it from the very beginning and show that he's still got the pace, oh, it'd be brilliant. Not only that rivalry that we'll get, but I think going forwards, we'll get a new era of Formula One that we'll be talking about for years to come. That'll be amazing.
Will be, and the young generation are coming. Does that mean, is it game over for Fernando Alonso now? Will he come back? Is it game over for Seb? The interesting part in all of this for me remains actually Aston Martin and the Racing Point team, and will they play a role in how this driver market works out? It's a big brand, it's a big name, there's big money from Lawrence Stroll. If he plumps for an Alonso or a Vettel, a big name like that, he's either got to let go of Perez, and Perez has got a long-term contract with them, so he's got to pay him out of that, or he's got to drop his son.
Mm-hmm. He doesn't want to do either of those things, if I'm honest. He's got the cash, Lawrence Stroll, to do that if he wants to, but he doesn't spend his money stupidly. Like, he'll want to be sensible. I think if push came to shove, they'd look to buy out Checo's contract and put whoever that big name driver is in alongside Lawrence Stroll. I just can't see Lance leaving yet. Lawrence and Lance have come too far now to end that kind of project now, even if it means that they can get a big name driver. And I think it makes more sense for Lawrence, at least, to move Checo on, despite his loyalty to the team, like huge loyalty to the team. But it would be amazing, like Aston Martin, what a brand. And if they're right up there and Sebastian likes his history, Sebastian Vettel with Aston Martin, bringing that brand back to the front of the grid, that would be a huge story for him. And he'd love that. He'd love that kind of challenge to get his teeth stuck into.
And Checo ends up at Renault because we always arrive at Singapore every year, and Checo's going to sign for Renault every year, and he doesn't. He stays at Force India / Racing Point. There we go. We fixed it, Lawrence. We've fixed the whole thing. Brilliant. Or does Bottas end up at Renault? Who knows? Chap, wonderful to talk. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for your insight. I know it's been a busy few days. How's lockdown?
Oh, I feel locked up.
How's it going?
I feel locked up. So no, it's going really well. This last couple of days of real news and making calls and kind of getting stuck into some stuff has been great. So real boost for everyone, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, look, thank you for your time. Thank you for your input. Folks, you can, of course, keep up to date with everything that's going on in Formula One at f1.com. You can read all of Lawrence's beautifully crafted words there and see wonderful videos like this. Thank you so much for following along. Lawrence, thank you for your input. Stay safe, folks, and we will see you soon.